Good afternoon. I'm Rev Dave Thompson. I'd like to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible study today. I'm a civil human minister, and so what that means is that I focus my ministry on building human peace and common ground. And so in that effort, I'm attempting to look at my own heritage, my own Christian heritage, to look at the scriptures and specifically Jesus's teachings, to try to find those teachings that I feel can be applied across the board universally to all humans, regardless of our faith, regardless of our politics, regardless of our lifestyle. I believe that there are significant and important lessons, even 2,000 years ago, taught by Jesus that actually translate across the board. And so those are the things that I'm looking for. We're continuing in our conversation, our series about what it looks like to be best, and kind of the example that is brought to us through Jesus' teachings on in a society, in this universe, with the rules that are in place, what's the best practice for us in order to be and have a good life, in order to have the best and most prosperous and peaceful society. Let's go ahead and jump into the text. It's Matthew chapter 20, verses 17 through 28. Starting with verse 17. Then Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 aside on the road and said to them, Behold, we're going to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and discourage and to crucify. And the third day he will rise again. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, What do you wish? She said to him, Grant that these 2 sons of mine may sit, one at your right hand and the other at your left, in your kingdom. But Jesus answered and said, You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They said to him, We are able. So he said to them, You will indeed drink my cup, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand or on my left hand is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father. And when the 10 heard it, they were moved with indignation against the 2 brothers. But Jesus called them to himself and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. We are faced today with leaders politically, socially, religiously, who are providing our society with an example of what they believe being best in our society is all about what it means to be great as a nation, as a globe, as a planet. And we are having to think about, really for the first time in a long time as a society, really think about what we see as great in our society. What do we count as good quality in a leader or even in a friend and in ourselves as being an example of what it means to be great, as what it means to be that example of greatness for other people to see. In this story today, and this example of this conversation that Jesus has with one of the mothers of 2 of his disciples, and with the disciples themselves, he demonstrates a different approach. And I want to talk in the end about why this is a better approach than many of our leaders are presenting today. But let's go ahead and walk through the text, just one section at a time. So Jesus has pulled his disciples aside and said, We're getting to Jerusalem. Remember, I told you that I'm going to be handed over to the religious leaders. They're going to basically torture me, put me to death, and that I'm going to raise myself from the dead, or be raised from the dead 3 days after. it's interesting to me that like the next step is this lady, Salome is what we think her name is, and she brings her two sons, James and John, the sons of Zebedee. They're two of Jesus's disciples, and so she, being clearly a very upfront mother and working really hard to secure her son's position in this new society that Jesus is building, brings her sons to him and says, "Hey, Jesus, I've got a favor to ask of you. Will you allow these two sons to sit next to you on your right hand and on your left hand?" Now, in this society, 2,000 years ago, the position of the throne is significant. Obviously, the king sits in the center throne, and to the right or to the left of them would be sitting those who were next in line, essentially, the second most powerful people in the society, whatever that is. And Jesus says, first of all, you don't even know what you're asking me to do. If you want them to be like me, then that means that they're going to have to drink the cup that I'm going to drink, figuratively speaking, and be baptized by the baptism I am. Now, what is Jesus talking about there? He's talking about what he just referenced, the fact that he's going to be tortured and killed at the hands of the religious leaders. As it turns out, so he goes back and says to them, that's what's going to happen. Can you handle that? Is that something you're going to be able to do? And they said, yeah, well, we will. And he goes, yes, you will, which is interesting because actually both of these disciples historically were also martyred and were also tortured in the same way that Jesus was. So in fact, it was sort of foretelling of that event, and all of the disciples ended up having to go through some version of martyrdom or suffering as a result of standing for this new type of society. And then Jesus says, okay, well, it's not really my place to decide who sits where in this new kingdom. So allegedly, when this all happens, who's going to be the most important? We don't know. That's for God to decide, or for these matters in the heavens or the universe to figure out, not us. And then the 10 other disciples, right? They started being quite upset because they're like, well, shoot, I can't believe it. Now, the mother just got her sons in the first two seats. What the heck? We're slacking. And so they're pressing into Jesus and trying to figure out where their seats are going to be. There are going to be other seats for us, Jesus? Well, it seems like they're all missing the boat completely. And that's where Jesus comes right back around and makes sure that his students understand what greatness looks like in a society that has peace and humility and prosperity as its results. He says to them, you know the rulers around us lord it over themselves. The fact that they can control and have authority over men, that's something they desire. And it seems like the disciples did too in this story. And then he talks about the fact that in this new society, we've talked about, the kingdom of heaven is what he says, but basically it translates into a society in this universe that functions best, essentially. That's going to give us the best and most happiest solution for the most people, and especially peace, which I know you and I are hopeful for, especially in the coming future with all the chaos that's happening. And so Jesus points out that in this society, the way that we maintain peace and the way that we maintain happiness for the greater majority of people is that the first needs to be last. Those of you who want to be great in this society must become the servant of another person, insomuch as Jesus says must become the slave of another person. In the States, especially the United States, and then elsewhere around the world, the word slave has become a different meaning. In that negative sense, it's a sense of property, and that's not the conversation that Jesus is having here. He's not saying that we should elect slavery. I want to just address this because I know it has been brought up before. This word really describes in their society somebody who gave over their assets and gave over their really control, but it was volitionary, and they would give it over to somebody who would be their lord or master, and it didn't mean that they couldn't ever get away. They certainly could. It was volitionary, and they weren't forced into it. But this was just a different relationship for people who either needed somebody to help take care of them because they didn't have enough money and so they needed a place to work, or for any number of reasons that it might have transpired. But here's the point. In our society, even right now, we wonder what these words that were written 2,000 years ago and said and taught in a society that in many ways looks very different than our own. But like I've said before, humanity has changed very little. Even today, we have people who are examples of leadership who use the word great to describe power, violence, and strength. The ability to control other people and to have the precedence and priority to demand other people cower to them. That is one way of looking at greatness. The problem with that is that involves violence. It involves violence to get to that position. We need to find a solution that has peace at its foundation. In order for us to move forward as a society, instead of looking to leaders who are trying to demonstrate greatness as being a violent and an arrogant position, we need to listen to these words as human beings that Jesus taught way back 2,000 years ago, that we must focus on helping to serve one another. That's why I love the term minister when they call it that in England. All their offices essentially are called minister or whatever. The word there really, minister means to serve. And that really is what it's supposed to mean. And it comes from this concept that Jesus talks about of becoming each other's servant. And so rather than having this triangle where at the top is the greatest and most powerful person with the most wealth, and really the only one happy, the rest and everybody else, greater majority, are suffering. Jesus flips this pyramid. And he asks that everybody who wants to be the greatest is going to have to come below to become the least, to help the most people, so that we, moving forward, not only in ourselves, but in our leaders and our friends, need to look for a quality of humility, a quality of individual who wants to help us just as much as we want to help them. When we orchestrate that kind of relationship and that kind of society, we have a society that is able to solve problems, is able to do the things that we need to do so that the majority of us can be happy and can have peace and can have prosperity. Because we're not looking at how to be violent or how to steal or to take from one another. We're looking at how to make each other happier and stronger. These may seem like pie in the sky concepts. They may seem good in Sunday school or maybe in the Bible, but not in the real world. I want to give you two examples. The first is Jesus himself. Whether you want to attribute historicity to him, whether you want to acknowledge him as being a real person or not, the story and the teachings of Jesus have revolutionized the world since then and have touched every single nation on this planet. That's how powerful and great a person can be who gives their life for other people. Gandhi being the second person. Gandhi gave up a lot of what he wanted to search for in being a lawyer and having greatness in that regard, and instead clothed himself with the common man's clothing and sought to help and serve the poor. And the man moved a nation to become independent. These matter. These teachings matter. And we have got to demand of our own leaders and ourselves and our friends that we look to help one another. Thank you for being a part of this series. It's Friday, so we've got our weekend coming up. That'll be nice. I'm looking forward to Monday. I think we have one more show in this series, and I'm looking forward to talking about Thank you for being a part of this experiment with me. I started this as a result of COVID. We were locked indoors, and I thought, why don't I use the time to look at my own heritage, to try to find things that I feel are applicable to everybody, all human beings, regardless, like I said, of our faith, our politics, or our lifestyle. And it's been eye-opening for me to see how much we can really take from these teachings 2,000 years ago. So I look forward to seeing you on Monday, live at noon. And until then, I want you to know that I love you. I hope you choose to love yourself as well. It's the only love that we really have any control over in this world. And now I invite you to join me as we go about the rest of our day and our weekend, loving our neighbors the same way. Thank you.